How do they keep reinventing blackface? How in 2024 do white people, especially white people with some prominence, okay, so I don't mean some like random dude who works at a Walmart in Ohio who dons blackface. I'm talking like the person who we are discussing today is a journalist. Like he has a public following. Like he's someone who attention is drawn to him because he's a public figure, somewhat. So, is this a new Black Like Me? Oh, he talks a lot in his book about Black Like Me, and basically is like, no one has done this type of experiment post Rodney King, post Obama, and so I undertook this because I was the person to do this and it needed to be done. So this journalist, Sam Forster, let's show you guys Sam Forster. This is him. He's Canadian and white as hell, which is relevant because of why he has made the news and why he has been called out. This is him. This is kind of sus to me that he has written for actually is National, I don't think National Post is. Maybe it's the Spectator. I've read a couple pieces recently in the Spectator that are just, so I was kind of like, oh, they're just letting everyone write for those publications. The National Post, okay, the National Post is right wing. That's what I thought. Anything with national in it, I should just assume it's a right wing rag in Canada. Cool. So that will already inform you about what Sam Forster's beliefs are, how this guy thinks, and why there was no way in hell that he was at all self-aware or had any business doing something like this. To be clear, in 2024, like at this point, no one should be doing blackface. There's no good that comes from blackface, but especially not when you are a guy who is as white as Sam Forster and who has right-leaning tendencies, okay? And his premise of this book is that institutional racism no longer exists in 2024, and people are confusing institutional racism with intrapersonal racism. Oh yeah. So he decided to go undercover as a black person to really understand what's going on in this country and to explain how racism against black people works. Because that's who we need to understand how racism against black people works. We don't need black people to explain it. We don't, like, that's not who we should be listening to. We should be listening to guys like Sam Forster who think that institutional racism is just a buzzword these days and nobody actually knows what institutional means. And so he's going to show that racism is really just intrapersonal. Yeah. Whew, baby. So he wrote this book called 7 Shoulders, Taxonomizing Racism in Modern America. Side note, he's also just not a very good writer. And then this is the cover of his art. Okay. Sam Forster expected some pushback online when he announced his latest book, 7 Shoulders, Taxonomizing Racism in Modern America. Detailed accounts of America's racial divide are nothing new, and particularly in the years since the murder of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police, there's been renewed interest in the topic. But the key difference between Forster's account and those written by others is that Forster, a white man, said he disguised himself as black. Also, he refers to black people in the book as blacks. Just another little side note. Tells you who this guy is. He donned an afro wig and dark foundation. He literally bought the darkest foundation he could get at a CVS and slathered that all over his face. And then he put his hood up and wore probably like a cheap wig from, I don't know, Spirit Halloween, and called himself a black guy. He did this to get a first-hand account of modern life as a person of color. The thing is, too, he won't drop any pics. People keep goading him into dropping photos, and he doesn't include pictures in his book. And I think the reason why is because there is no way that he actually passed for a black person. Here's the thing. When John Howard Griffin did this 64 years ago, John Howard Griffin, who wrote the book Black Like Me, which was one of the most famous books on race relations in Jim Crow South, and is still taught in schools today. So, John Howard Griffin was he was a writer, and he saw how few white writers during this era were arguing for integration. And he saw how few black authors were getting opportunities in the first place to write. And then for those who were being heard. Like nobody was giving a shit what black authors had to say. And so in order to comprehend what it was like to be a black person in the Jim Crow South, John Griffin underwent a skin darkening process. He worked with his dermatologist on this. Underwent a skin darkening process to disguise himself as a black person, as a black man, and went all throughout the South from New Orleans to Atlanta. And in this book, he talks about his experiences confronting his own racism as a white man, and also what Jim Crow South was really like, and how racism was just not an issue for Southerners, because it's not just Jim Crow that he talks about, or he's not just the South that he talks about, but it was a human issue. Like, this was not something that was just relegated to one particular group of people. Like, racism against black people in America was all over the place and just embedded in the institutions. And it was a really powerful book at the time, because the truth is that black people were so rarely heard when they talked about their racial experiences. There were a lot of white people who had no fucking idea that any of this shit existed. Like, they truly didn't know. But at the end of the day, this was still a book for white people. Just like White Fragility was a book for white people. This was not a book for black people, because no book written by a white person is about racism against black people in America is ever going to be for black people. But it was very effective when it came out, and it was so effective that he was like beaten up by the KKK. His family was threatened. His children and his parents had to go into exile. Like, it took a serious, it had a serious strain on his life, because that was just not something that was discussed as openly as it is today. Nowadays, like, look, yeah, still got racism, of course, but we have black authors and lawyers and politicians. Like, there are lots of black people in public spaces talking about their experiences being black. We have plenty of black authors, et cetera, et cetera. 60 plus years ago, that was not the case. So this type of racial experiment and reporting had much more of an effect and purpose than it does in 2024. And I will say, to John Griffin's credit, he eventually stopped doing public appearances. He stopped touring. He stopped really talking about, he stopped like centering himself or talking about this book, because he's like, a white man should not be leading these discussions on racism against black people in this country. Like, it is not right for me to be a white spokesman for Black America, because at the end of the day, I am a white person. And it got so bad when he was on his journey, when he was writing this book, it got so bad at one point that he went into the bathroom and basically like tried to scrub as much of the skin darkening treatment from him until he was passably white. And that's like, that's a big difference there. Like, black people can't just scrub their skin color off. It's not like, it's not something that they can put on or take off. Like, this is something that they live with every single day. And it's why when there are writings from white people concerning racism against black people in this country, it's never for black people. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the people who you should always listen to, who you should learn from, are the people who experience that very thing. So, anywho, that was the book that was written in the 1960s. In 1961, it was when it was published, and he did his research throughout the 50s, and that is one of the books that Sam Forster references at multiple points as to why this is something that he needed to do now in 2024. He's like, hey, look, people have done this before, and that work was incredibly important. And it's not to say that work wasn't important. Totally different time period, totally different person than Sam Forster. Sam Forster is just, he's just a fucking egomaniac. And he is starting off on the grounds that institutional racism no longer exists in 2024. You cannot expect anything of value to come from somebody who is writing a book about race relations, about how black people are treated in this country, when that is the starting point. There's literally no need for this at all. No. We have to stop doing blackface too. There is no, yeah, it was blackface, but there's no situation where in today's society, blackface is something that you can keep defending. Like, oh my God, how are we still doing this? Okay, anyway. Forster says, certainly I was aware that people were going to express criticism of the book on those grounds. The grounds being that he is a white guy who put on a wig and dark foundation and pretended to be black. But I feel like the book that I produced was an important enough contribution to the discourse to overcome those concerns, the 27-year-old Forster told NPR. No, simply not true. When the Montreal resident first announced his project in a since-deleted tweet on X, the backlash was swift and severe. This was his tweet. I disguised myself as a black man and traveled throughout the United States to document how racism persists in American society. Writing Seven Shoulders was one of the hardest things I've ever done as a journalist. Wait till you guys find out. Wait till I read the part of how he went about this, okay? And why it's called Seven Shoulders. The tweet was quickly ratioed, with responses and quotes of the tweet outperforming likes on the message more than 15-1. You had to do blackface to understand the issues that black people face. You could have spoken with Black Americans, another replied. I have serious questions as to why and how you disguised yourself as a Black American to write this book. The how of the disguise is easy to answer. Hitchhiking across the United States, including the Las Vegas desert in the scorching summer, Forster wore a hoodie to cover most of his body. Yeah, here's the thing. Doesn't matter that he's wearing a hoodie. His way of doing blackface was choosing dark foundation. Like, I need to see photos to prove my theory that he actually did not pass at all for a Black guy, and therefore his experiment was moot from the start. Like, ain't no way. Onto his irises went dark contact lenses to conceal his conspicuously blue eyes, an afro wig that covered his hair, and perhaps most jarringly, slathering dark foundation, specifically liquid Maybelline in the shade mocha, onto his hands, face, and neck. It's the why that has left most people, even Forster himself, confused at times. Despite his confidence in hindsight discussing the importance of his choice to perform what he calls journalistic blackface, which, by the way, he wants to clarify is a different type of blackface, and it's acceptable blackface. If you're doing journalistic blackface, then it's okay because you're doing so for an important purpose. Forster expresses doubt at his decision making. My pupils connect with themselves in the mirror's reflection. If I am applying the dark foundation to my cheeks and forehead, even after a few days worth of experience, performing this transformation feels very bizarre, he writes in the book. What are you doing, Sam? He continues. Is this too far? For many who have heard of the new book, for which the idea was conceived, executive, and self-published within a year, the answer is yes. The nonfiction account currently sits near the top of new releases in Black and African American history on Amazon. Ah! But the reviews are a dismal 1.5 stars out of 5 on the site. The idea that we need someone to take on a Black identity or identity of the other in order to understand, I think in a number of ways, really just dismisses the mounds of historical evidence that we have, said Derek Brooms, executive director of the Black Men's Research Institute at Morehouse College. To say that I need to write a book and ignore what Black folks have been telling us and continue to tell us, I don't really see what the place of that is in a healthy understanding of race and racism in the 21st century. Forster said he was inspired to write the book after reading previous accounts of white people dressing up in blackface for journalistic purposes. He specifically cites John Howard Griffith's 1961's Black Like Me, in which the white author recounts darkening his skin with an anti-vitiligo drug in order to understand racial strife in the Jim Crow South. Here's the thing. If Sam Forster actually understood the totality of John Howard Griffin's experience doing this and the aftermath of his book coming out, he would note that John Howard Griffin expressed his discomfort and awkwardness at having been made a white spokesman for Black America because he was a white man who wrote a book on racism in the Jim Crow South that white people felt comfortable reading because he was a white man. And eventually he stopped, as I said, he stopped doing lectures. He stopped speaking on the book because he didn't want to be in that position anymore. He's like, I shouldn't be the premier voice on racism against Black people in this country because I am, at the end of the day, and at the start of the day, a white man. And that was in 1961. That was at a time when Black voices were way less heard than they are now. That unfortunately, it did take something like Black Like Me to reach a lot of people in this country and for them to understand for the first time what being Black in Jim Crow entailed. Like, for a lot of people who read it, it was like they had never They didn't know anything. They had no idea the reality of being black. So now here we are in 2024, and Sam Forster, he's not that guy. He isn't. Like no white guy needs to be that guy in 2024, but especially Sam. Obviously, in American society, there were major civil rights legislation that was passed in the early 60s. You know, most notably, there was the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which was 60 years ago from this year, which I found to be an interesting milestone or anniversary or whatever to see how things have progressed. Among the many critics of his use of blackface has been the NAACP. Writing on Twitter, the organization's president, Derek Johnson, said, "Being able to pick and choose when you experience blackness is not a reality for the millions of black people that we serve, who face racism and marginalization every day. Next time, try investing time in centering authentic black voices and experiences." Forster did not consult with any black people ahead of undertaking the experiment. No shit. That, he said, would have been pandering. And he was reluctant to share what feedback he has received from any black friends or colleagues. Instead, responding to the public backlash, Forster said that there are many people who are pleased with his work. Everybody's saying it. Everybody loves the book. And are likely afraid to speak openly. Okay, keep smoking on that copium. When pressed as to whether there is any validity to concerns that his use of blackface could be viewed offensively, if perhaps the resounding outrage has any merit, Forster is defensive. "I believe that a lot of that passion is misguided or not grounded in a well-understood review of what the book is actually about. I understood that it would be a controversial project, and I'm optimistic that as more people read the book and as reviews come out in the future, the visible response will become more balanced." Forster describes the revelations of ongoing racism as not terribly shocking to anyone who's spent considerable time in the United States. The actual portion of the book where I'm, doing this immersive journalism is really only the middle section. You guys, so here's what he did, okay? He would go to these like forks in a highway system, and he would hitchhike, all right? He would hitchhike as a white man, and then he would hitchhike doing blackface. That was the experiment. How many people, like part of it, how many people will pick him up if he's a white man versus if he's a black man? Once again, Sam Forster is forgetting that it is 2024. Hitchhiking ain't really a thing, okay? People, if they see hitchhikers, no matter the race, are probably thinking, nice try, serial killer. I don't think so. This is not the 60s. This is certainly not the 70s. This is 2024. People don't fucking pick up hitchhikers. You barely even see hitchhikers. And that was his experiment. To base it off of if people choose him as a passenger, if he's white, and if they don't because he's black, like, it's so stupid. It's so dumb. This man is an idiot. Forster insists that it is his role as a writer to commit to storytelling. "My job is to write books that people find interesting and compelling and stimulating." Oh, he keeps, in his Twitter, he keeps referring to himself as a gonzo journalist. I'm like, buddy, no. "I want to write things that force people to have conversations about culture and about our experiences. And I think I've done that. And I think I've done it in a way that's sensible and honest and as respectful as I could speak in." No, you have not. When asked if these same experiences could have been relayed by an actual black person speaking to their lived experience, Forster acknowledges that people are unsettled by the journalistic tactics he employed. Wow, he's so crazy. He's so out there. But he says, in order for some in white America who downplay the existence of racism, maybe the voice of a white man would be more compelling. There is a considerable portion of white America that believes black racial grievance is exaggerated or entirely fabricated, and who find the writing of white journalists or academics more compelling than the writing of black academics. I don't feel the need to apologize for that.
The white man white author that...
Oh my God.
I didn't tell
Has
you
anybody
about this.
seen this? I'm sorry, finish introducing me.
I didn't tell you about this. I just want to Trojan horse my way into
No. I saw this one. You know this made its way back to me.
A Canadian white man cosplays in blackface for a summer instead of just interviewing black people about their lived experience. To then write a book about your cosplay experience and claim it to be the most important book on race relations is true colonizer behavior.
Seven Shoulders is the most important book on American race relations that has ever been written.
This is in reference to he deleted the tweet. I don't blame him. Smart man. But this is in reference to the fact that you now have a book called Seven Shoulders that is now going to be up on screen. Seven Shoulders by Sam Forster.
Is this the art he chose?
That is the art he chose. That it looks a little bit like that. Like you didn't see like the Nigerian fellas that like were making like almost like
We know
The
Picasso
hardest
got
thing
a-
he's
well,
ever
he
done
denies
as a
it, but he got
journalist.
his style from Africa, so it makes sense that you know that.
I didn't know that, but I'm like,
Yeah, but you know you didn't know it, but you knew it.
It's like, oh yeah, okay, that make a little bit of sense. Oh, I can see it right now. Yeah, like this shit. So man, like legit cosplayed as a black man in blackface, and then turned around to tell people that he now sees and understands what systemic racism is, simply due to the fact that he cosplayed as a black man.
Only as a comedy. Only.
But he also doesn't do that. Like that's not the conclusion in his book. What he sets out to dismantle through the most important book on race relations that Sam Forster has written is that there is a difference between institutional racism and intrapersonal racism. And he believes that he is the person who actually understands what the word institutional means and how it's not what everybody thinks it is, and how in 2024, institutional racism is not what it was 60 years ago.
Only if it's written by Ben Stiller and starring Robert Downey Jr.
What do you mean, you people?
What do you mean, you people?
Huh?
You know what I'm saying? If you want me to take it seriously, I
think like honestly, the fact that like this could
Wait,
happen.
did he do it in Canada?
No, he did it in the US.
I think he's just Canadian. I don't know if he did it in Canada. Honestly, if this was already a thing. I didn't even realize this. Black like me.
White people not original.
This is already done in the 1960s. A white journalist dressed in blackface and traveled through the South to gain a perspective on what it was like for African Americans during the Jim Crow era. It was made into a movie. They made it. They gave him a movie. Like, are they just scared to like talk to niggas? Is just like that?
It's because we're not human to them. It's because we're not human to them. He basically dressed up as a fucking like Dragon Ball character in his head.
This is for everyone you've killed!
Oh, let me clarify, because 3 Bakes, you're not wrong in what you're saying, but that's not how Sam approaches racism. He's not talking about white people excluding their individual beliefs and behaviors and only look at racism as, oh yeah, well the criminal justice system is racist. Like there is institutional racism, but I have no part of it. No, he is coming from a place that institutional racism is no longer a thing in the United States. Like that's the place that he's coming from. He says, he begins the book by saying that he often feels that he is, quote, the only person within 1,000 miles who understands what the word institutional and the phrase institutional racism means. Oh, I know I'm memeing on him. I fully understand it. He's not nearly that well thought out about this. Oh, totally. I didn't know if you just gotten here. If you want to read a book that affirms, this is still a quote, that affirms your ethical intuitions about rightness or wrongness, go read something else, he writes in the preface, adding that he didn't write this book to bemoan America's racial history in highly emotional and moralizing terms. He's just also a bad writer. I know I already said this, but he's a bad writer. Forster says that even though it's already been done 3 times before, he, quote, had no choice but to do it as well. And by it, journalistic blackface. He claims that this experiment is necessary because he's the first white person to do so in, quote, a post-Rodney King America, a post-Obama presidency America, a post-Trayvon Martin, post-Eric Garner, post-Michael Brown, and post-George Floyd America. He makes a big deal about the fact that he didn't ask permission from any black people before he did this, as if it's not obvious by the fact that he actually did it and published a book about it and then proceeded to brag about it on Twitter like he did his big one. Quote, after a brief bit of reflection, however, I decided that seeking this sort of affirmation was wholly unnecessary. I almost wonder if he's trolling. Like, he has to be trolling.
England murderer! Hold your fire! This man isn't black!
It is this. It could be the same thing. I wanted to see what it would feel like to be a Saiyan for 90 days. So I cut my hair. I cut my hair the same way for 90 days straight and dyed it blonde and learn how to do the Kamehameha waves just to see how people would react. And it's like it's you could just listen to black people tell, and that's
No, here's what he says. He addressed the idea that he could have spoken with black people about their lived experience by saying, quote, many such books have been written, both by blacks and by whites, and most of them are tremendously boring. The fact that American blacks have a different perspective than American whites does not mean that they have a broader perspective. Oh, he can't be for fucking real. Ain't no way. No way. No way. This guy, I'm telling you, this all comes from him having a godlike complex. He is an ego bigger than the size of Canada. He's like, I am that guy.
Let me bring it down a couple notches. I'm in this room sweating. I don't know why I'm so fucking hot in this room.
Man, you think it's you.
You been seeing me.
That's how I feel
myself?
every stream.
I guess it's sunny out. I don't know. But so shout out to Ice Cube for doing the reverse. Did you remember that?
That show? What's it called?
It's only it's not a good thing, but it was entertaining. He did the show Black. Is it Black White?
Yeah, it's bigger than Black and White or something like that. Yeah,
something like that.
I don't understand how that existed.
I don't either. Like now, especially.
He has a chapter in the book called "Becoming Black."
That was like '97. But yeah, it's one of the things that I think about a lot. I'm planning my end of the year video to get that Christmas money.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, not that. Like I don't know what's everything that's happening in between. I just know that's gonna be the end of the year video because we got to get them Christmas checks.
Oh yeah.
Them post creators in the chat. Them post Thanksgiving checks. Them shits hit.
I like legit like the first time like this last one I think I dropped like racism in gaming and like that shit did numbers and like everything was just synergy. I was just like, man, I ain't gotta make a video. I said I ain't gotta make no video. I'm about to be on paternity leave. You know, I'm about to get ready to go out. Man, I saw like that CPM on January hit. I was just like, let me get my ass back to work and drop like 2 videos in February.
On the fucking plantation.
Yep.
The YouTube plantation. I'm doing basically it's gonna be called something like there's no such thing as being white. I don't know what it is.
Whiteness isn't real type thing?
Whiteness isn't real, and here's why. But I brought that up because blackness isn't real either, right? But specifically, whiteness and blackness exist, at least in America, worldwide to an extent, but I can't speak to that.
I push back on that though. I think that like you would say differently, because like I would be of the perspective, I know what you're saying, but I mean I'll be of the perspective that black is actually the only thing that's real, in the sense that like it's the only culture and experience that is coalesced because of whiteness. It's because of like because of the oppression at the hand of white supremacy. It has created blackness. So blackness was created like a lab experience type, but it's probably the only experience at all. Everybody else
truly unified in that way. Yeah, no. So
that's why we work. Like that's why this works. Like like this is a shared experience. Like you don't get an Irish person and an Italian person that are able to go and like specifically, well, to an extent, but like specifically.
They can around being racist.
Racism is the only true experience. Like,
racism is the only true experience. It's a bonding practice. It's a bonding practice, but legit, it's a bonding practice.
And I would add too that it's not just specifically black skin or like black people in America or African people. It's the issue of colorism in so many different cultures and around the world, where there is bigotry and discrimination that people face in all sorts of races and ethnicities, depending on how dark their skin is. So we talked about this with Asians, that dark-skinned Asians face more discrimination. How in America the economic divide is the greatest amongst the Asian community, between East Asians and then Southeast Asians, and just how much racism is within the Asian community when it comes to Southeast Asians. So it is certainly this is the issue with darker skin and how that leads to discrimination relates back to, though, how whiteness made black skin an identifying marker to discriminate against people who had that skin color.
What you mean with that, though?
Yeah, and so bringing it back to this dude's book and the history of this happening, but the difference is we are aware of the manufactured way in which we learn to connect with each other. You know what I'm saying? Like we learned that because of how blackness is regarded, we learn to relate to each other through blackness almost as a survival mechanism. Whereas for white people, it's really passive. You know what I'm saying? It's not a intelligent decision. It's just they notice that there's no black people around them, and when black people come around, some of their uncles start to act differently. You know what I'm saying? And so
was that?
And so I said this to say, when you have like large swaths, like there's large swaths of white people that have literally never met a black person in America.
Yep.
There's large communities that literally have never saw, never talked to, you know what I'm saying? And so to them, blackness only exists through these commodified vessels. So why don't I just do that myself? It makes perfect sense. I'll just put on some shoe polish and walk through the world and whatever. And it's really like a verification of Afro-pessimism. You know what I'm saying? It's a vindication of Afro-pessimism that is something that has happened multiple times. And even in Spike Lee, shit, I'm about to fuck up there. Spike Lee got problems, but Ice Cube is no Spike Lee. Yeah. Even in Ice Cube's show, it was so funny. The father didn't learn anything. The father he dressed like a black man for however long, and at the end of it, he was affirmed in his head that racism wasn't real and black people be making shit up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Let's see if we can find it's probably a clip for it. Bruno, I think his name.
Bruno.
My name is Bruno, and I became a black person.
on, man. I was incognizant. I was.
When did this come out? When did this come out? It had to be the late 90s. I feel like it was after the Rodney King.
This came out in 2006.
Nah.
Oh, this is that reality show.
I know this didn't happen when I was. Oh my God, it did.
Man, come on, man.
Oh, we're cooked. We're cooked.
We're so done. There's no excuse
I watched this.
for
I was
this.
out of college and I saw this.
Blood, no, man. I can't reconcile with that. Like, this could not happen. This should not be happening. Not in the arts. Come on, man.
Not Barack Obama was the president 2 years later, and this nigga looked like
So embarrassing. This is an American history forever.
He brought it in. He's the reason why we got him. Oh Lord. But like, yeah, that's a big L.
With Bruno, like this episode.
No one knew that I was actually black when I had my white makeup.
Who didn't know that you wasn't actually black?
Yeah, I don't know. Clearly, that didn't.
This one in Emmy. There's only one season of the show.
There's no way.
There's only one season of the show because Ice Cube said the world isn't ready for it. God damn, Ice Cube.
This
man.
was their makeup.
God damn.
Because that's Anthony Fantano uncle. Like
niggas in my comment section actually right now, they thought that Anthony Fantano was black. Like, have you ever heard that?
Anthony Fantano, he could if he wanted to try. I'm sure he could get over. He better than Sean King.
He'll get us on
Sean King.
like legitimately, like niggas come inside my comment section all the time saying, I thought that Anthony Fantano was white. Why are you talking about he's as white as the nut that brought you into this world? I was just like, Anthony Fantano is a white man. But the thing is, like, Anthony would laugh at that. Oh, is he?
Italian. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Anthony Fantano is Italian, and Italy has a interesting racial legacy. That's something I actually was gonna bring up when I do this video, because there's essentially, this is not. Please don't come for me as I say this, especially you biracials and black folks. But essentially, there were light and dark Italians, and like in American early years, dark Italians were treated like niggas in a lot of situations.
Yep.
They didn't want to be niggas. They didn't like niggas.
Just watch The Godfather.
Yeah, but they were getting lynched. Like, there were lynchings of Italians in like the South.
You know what it is? I'll tell you what it is. It's anti-Italian discrimination.
In a lot of situations. And so through some mechanism, and Italy is right there by Egypt, and Egypt is not a white European country. And Egyptians, like all the people that are in Egypt now, came from fucking Africa, the rest of Africa.
You get some
they
people
were
mad.
black. They just ain't as black as they used to be.
You'll get some people mad.
Get some people mad. I got it with my hotep hat. Real quick. The Egyptians were black.
They gonna come like say, no, they are Arab. I can see them right now.
Yeah, right. They were Arab. And European Arabs. Like the origins of that country. That nation do not start in fucking the Caucasus Mountains. And so Italy's right next to Egypt. So basically there's a lot of melanin in there. Now the full phenotypical, biological, blood quantum shit, I don't know. And I ain't about to get into all that with you. But some of them look like niggas. We'll leave it at that. So, but this person does not.
No,
this is Robert. What's the dude that makes the songs? You're late for work. Who gives a fuck? You don't know what I'm talking about?
No, man, I missed that.
Oh, yes, you do. You got to know this guy. Somebody tell me in the chat.
You late for work?
You're late for work. Who gives a fuck? And he starts playing the song.
I'm waiting on chat to tell me. Chat, Mark, Italian stablet.
Mark Ribbolette.
Mark Ribbolette. Please go to that. You don't know who that is?
Mark Ribbolette.
He got hot during the COVID. You know this guy, right?
Actually, yeah, no, I have seen this nigga before.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Fair enough.
He's actually really dope. I mean, I don't know anything else other than like he just freestyles funky ass shit. He did a whole thing with Erykah Badu. I was jealous.
Man, look, I didn't realize, like, it hit me like I didn't even realize that John B was not white. Like,
oh yeah.
I was just like, how y'all let this shit happen? Like,
because here's the thing, like, Lil Bill actually did he ever come out with this video? He might have interviewed from this video. Yeah, White Soul. Did he do that video?
Yeah, but he didn't talk about John B. Because I feel like we just think that he's black. I always thought John B was just like black.
And this is like, so Cookout still closed, right?
Yeah,
but there's white people that don't need a Cookout invite because they've been there. Before we called it the Cookout, before it became a meme, they were there.
They got a legacy ticket.
They got a legacy pass there.
They grandfathered in.
And so he's one of them. John B, Tina Marie, Michael McDonald, JBL somehow. That was wild. Did you see that? JBL from wrestling. Somebody said JBL, like somebody, I saw that last time I was on Twitter, they were like JBL not being MAGA. Got to be the funniest thing.
Yeah, I did see that.
He came out on some like Black Lives Matter, supporting some shit. It was like Paul Wall's another one. Right? People like JBL. What? Like that's a fun man.
I am. Let's watch a little bit of
Canadian man.
Let's watch a little bit of Cindy's video, but then we'll move on to. She's very funny.
As most people with common sense know, black people have gotten the short end of the stick for a very long time. And in publishing, that's not really any different. Already, in the month of Juneteenth, we got a black author finding out that her book got an unapproved whitewash cover in Bulgaria. A black VP and executive editor at a big publishing print was laid off for a company restructure. And a journalist announced that he wrote a self-published book about what he learned about racism while doing blackface. So that's what I'm going to be focusing for today's video. The general summary is that there is a Canadian journalist named Sam Forster who recently decided to stir the pot by tweeting, "Last summer, I disguised myself as a black man and traveled throughout the United States to document how racism persists in American society. Writing Seven Shoulders."
Let me just look something up real fast. This is the foundation that he put on, by the way. Like, there's just no way, dude. There is no way that he at all passed as a black man. Here he is. I disguised myself as a black man. Oh, because he had to, you guys.
This was one of the hardest things I've ever done as a journalist. Writing a book is definitely hard, but you know what would have made it like a little bit easier?
Maybe he's black, maybe it's Maybelline.
Black people instead of doing blackface. He technically does interview at least 2 black people for this book. He doesn't name who they are, so who knows where he got these people from, but other than that, he doesn't believe in doing research or consulting academic research for other people who have done this already, because he believes their writing is more about their morals rather than about scholarship. We will unpack all of that later. This tweet has not been deleted, but he's still holding on to his convictions that somehow this book was needed, and the book's page is still up on Amazon for sale, so this is what the blurb says. Journalistic blackface was one of the driving forces behind the civil rights movement. I'm not sure if that was the driving force, nor am I sure that you actually have.
And also, John Edward Griffin would not have said that. Sorry, John Howard Griffin, the author of Black Like Me. He would never, ever have claimed that his book, Black Like Me, was a driving force behind the civil rights movement. He would not take that credit from the actual black Americans who were the driving force behind the civil rights movement.
Sources to back that up, but okay. By going undercover to expose the harsh realities of Jim Crow, journalists Ray Sprinkle, John Howard Griffin, and Grace Halsell shaped the racial attitudes of untold millions of their white compatriots. Seven Shoulders is an homage to their work and a vigorous attempt to make sense of American race relations in the modern era. Right now, he's selling the book for $25, and honestly, if I thought about all the things I could spend $25 on, this would be be one of the worst things. Like, I might as well kill a tree because it would be just as wasteful. And because he can't resist sharing his thoughts to the world, he also posted an article for people to read that is an excerpt from the book, specifically a chapter titled Becoming Black. So in this video, I'm going to be reading the article and tearing it apart, and also pointing out the logical fallacies of journalistic blackface as a practice. And that way, you don't have to read his book, because I guarantee you it brings nothing of value to the conversation. You know why? Because there are already tons of books and articles and studies and academic research by Black people historically and today who talk about their experiences and their research about this. We didn't need a random dude from Canada to confirm the racism in America. So we're just gonna read this article, laugh at how dumb this guy is, and move on to read better books. And a great way to discover good authors, including people of color, is through today's sponsor, Book of the Month. You might recognize them from their iconic blue box, but if you don't, their whole mission is to help readers discover new books that they love and to help promote the work of emerging authors. So every month they go through hundreds of book titles, curate 5 to 7 of the best new releases for you to choose from to be delivered right to your door. It is risk-free, so you can skip.
I'm just gonna skip to the end of this.
I want to conclude this video by talking about journalistic blackface in general, because this practice is something that directly inspired this guy to do it. And I want to share my thoughts on why this doesn't actually work for making progress in civil rights, or even as good practice in journalism. Again, him doing blackface to report on racism is nothing new, because people have done this before and wrote books about it. He cites them and talks extensively about them, ironically much more than actual Black people. There's Ray Spriegel, who wrote an account of traveling in 1948 for a month in the Deep South while passing for Black, and this was serialized in a newspaper. There's another book called Black Like Me in 1961, where the author spent 6 weeks traveling through the southern US after darkening his skin to understand what life was like for Black Americans under segregation. And then there's Soul Sister, which was published in 1969, where this woman took pills that were used to alleviate pigmentation problems in order for her to darken her skin and pass as Black. She documented these experiences in her book, and she mentioned that she had been inspired to do that by the previous book, Black Like Me. Funny how these white people just keep on inspiring each other, but not to actually not be racist. You could argue that maybe the previous journalists had felt compelled to do this because maybe there were less opportunities for Black people to be accepted as journalists in the 60s and therefore be able to write about their experiences. But if this argument were true, that makes what this guy did in 2024 even more pointless and redundant, because he had every resource from Black people readily available to him now more than ever. And like, he didn't bring anything new to the table. If something's already been done and the question of the experiment has already been answered, why are we doing this again? I think the question of whether racism exists is very redundant. Instead, the question that these people should be asking is, why do I have to pretend to be someone else in order to understand something? Why do I need to experience something myself instead of believing what groups of people have been saying for years? Why do I have to insert myself into something instead of sitting back and listening to other people? Why do I have to be affected by it first in order to care about it? This doesn't just apply to race, but everything else when it comes to marginalized people being understood. Why do men have to have daughters in order to sympathize for women being sexually harassed? Why do cisgender men?
That is one thing that constantly grates me whenever you see a woman who is hello? Hi. Whenever you see a woman who is a victim of abuse, and they're like, as you know, she's somebody's daughter, somebody's sister, somebody's wife. It's like, no, she's her. She's a woman. She's a human being. Why do we have to? Matt Damon famously was like, yeah, as a dad with 3 daughters now, I have to like speak up and support the Me Too movement. It's like, bruh, why don't you just do that as yourself? Like, why does it have to be related to you having daughters? Oh, so you have no empathy for women? You didn't have empathy for women before until you had daughters? Like, I hate that shit. I fucking hate that shit. When if I were to be talking about, I don't know, if I were talking about something that affects men, I wouldn't be like, something that affects men that I'm coming from a place of empathy for. I'd be like, yeah, as someone who has a brother, or like as the daughter of a man. No, I would just be looking at it as myself. Like, how do I feel in this situation as a human being? looking at human beings. Like when I look at how little coverage Palestinian men get when it comes to talking about their deaths, when it comes to talking about their lives, and how everything is like women and children because that's what elicits sympathy. And I like care about Palestinian men who have also been killed. It's not like, oh, as someone who has a father, as someone who has a brother, as someone who dates a man, I now have empathy for like these men in this situation. That's ridiculous. That's insane. I hate that stuff.
And have to wear a period cramp simulator to understand that people who have periods are in actual pain. Why is our lack of empathy for others so limited unless we center ourselves in it? And besides the method of journalistic blackface being faulty on a philosophical level, on a practical level, it's not an even accurate way to understand race anyway. Again, it's something that you are able to pick and choose, which is not enough to understand something that people have no choice but to live with every single day. It's an isolated experiment in a very limited time frame, and it doesn't encompass the full spectrum of a group of people's experience. I would argue that journalistic blackface is just as bad as regular blackface for a minstrel show because it's still dehumanizing. It's still very much motivated by this sense of voyeurism in trying to inhabit another person's body. Just because it's not for a performance, for a minstrel show, doesn't mean that it's any less dehumanizing. It's still very like perverse and, again, voyeuristic in a way. And I feel like deep down, the motivation to doing this is less about doing any public good and more just for a self-serving purpose. You're daring to do something different. You're excited by the voyeurism of pretending to be someone else. You get to make money from doing something controversial. At the end of the day, it's still all about you. And lastly, you want to know how journalistic blackface isn't actually effective in dismantling racism and getting white people to change their minds? It's because at the end of the day, this man in 2024 still did blackface because he was inspired by other white people doing blackface. But hey, you got the attention you wanted. You can pat yourself on the back or jack off in your little corner that you did something that made you feel important. A white man doing blackface because he was inspired by other white people doing blackface? Groundbreaking. I personally wouldn't say you had the guts to do this, more like the caucasity to do this. So on that note, I'm gonna end the video here, but I thank you for listening and I will see you next time. Bye.
Also, you know, this is not the last white person who's going to do journalistic blackface. This is just, you know that it doesn't start and end here. Sigh. It's a conservative mind virus. They can only relate to something that affects someone they feel are part of their group and family, perceived tribe, or religious or political group, even then just barely. Yeah, it's like how a conservative who's against LGBTQ rights can be against LGBTQ rights while still loving someone in their family who's gay, because they look at that person as an individual. It's like, oh, well, I love you because you are my daughter. And that that kind of explains that conundrum there. Like, how do you support this person? How do you love this person? And yet you are against collective rights for the marginalized community that they are a part of.